In brewing, we often try to get all of the ingredients to work in harmony to make a great beer. Now, sometimes you have to single out some of those ingredients to see what they contribute to that harmony. Today's video is all about the smash beer. How's it going? My name's Brian. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you'd like to learn more about electric brewing and see tips videos just like this one, consider subscribing. And if you do, don't forget to click that bell so you won't miss a video when it comes out. Now, just in case you've never heard of a smash beer, what smash stands for is single malt and single hop. So basically, you're just going to be using a base grain along with the hop. So a good way to experiment with these typically is you get a hop that you haven't had before or haven't used before, and you basically brew it with like some pale 2-row, throw that single hop in there, and then you find out what the characteristics of that hop are. And conversely, you could also do the same thing with a malt. If you get a new malt from, say, a local maltster, which I've had, actually in my case, I've gotten a new malt from a local Ohio maltster, so I'm going to be doing a smash beer to see kind of what that malt tastes like. But those are all great examples of doing, an experiment with those type of beers and seeing what those ingredients bring to the table, which can be very advantageous, especially if you're starting out and you want to know, what certain hops taste like without any interference from other flavors in the brew. Now, another smash beer technique that you may not have thought of is yeast. So, you get a different yeast, a new yeast, and you want to see what it tastes like, how it does. Do that in a smash beer. So try different yeast. Let's say Imperial comes out with some newfangled yeast, which shout out to Imperial Yeast. They are a supporter of the homebrew club that I belong to, which is Brewtubers online homebrew club. Thank you so much for your sponsorship. But maybe they come out with a new yeast and you want to try it out. And the nice thing about doing it in a smash beer, you're really not going to impart a whole lot of characteristic to it enough that you could not use that kind of as a starter. So, build up that yeast, and if you like the way that it performs, then you've got some yeast built up, and you can either wash it or do, section it out and do more starters or whatever with it and have a yeast bank from a smash beer. On the same line of yeast, maybe temperatures or something you want to mess with. If there's a temperature range that a certain yeast imparts a certain flavor, maybe try, that in a smash beer. Try a different temperature. And being, generally you brew a smaller batch, it may be easier to maintain the temperature that you want, either heating or cooling or whatever. But, do an experiment with yeast temperatures, fermenting at different temperatures and see what you get. Now, something else that has kind of intrigued me, and I actually haven't done a lot of this, the mash range is pretty wide, like 147 to 161 degrees generally. What does 147 degree mash do for the beer? Well, typically, from what they say, it should dry it out. I know Marshall has a segment on his Brewlosophy podcast about doing two different mashes, and one of them, each end of the spectrum. And the interesting thing about it was that, the higher mash, 161 degree mash temperature, that actually wound up yielding a beer that had a lot more body. People liked it a lot more. And then the 147 degree mash beer was a lot drier. People didn't like it as much. So, I think it's really a good idea to maybe toy around with that and use a bunch of different malts and see, okay, if I mash Maris Otter at 161 degrees, what does that contribute to the flavor? Do I taste more flavor of the Maris Otter? Is it a sweeter, more body? That type of thing. Now, with regards to temperature, my friend David Heath, he recently did a video about a low ABV beer that actually, I think he mashed the grain at like 178 degrees, which was completely crazy. Now, there were some other factors involved in that, and I'll put a card up here as well as leave a link down in the description for that video so you can go check it out. But that's a great example of a mash temperature that's outside the norm that brought some different results. So I think it's a good idea to experiment with temperatures of your mash even. Now, another thing you can do with smash beers is blending. Now, so, maybe you get some new HBC 272 or whatever, it's some experimental hop, and you like the descriptors of it, but you're not exactly sure how it does. So do a smash beer with that hop. And then let's say your favorite hop is Mosaic or Citra or one of those. Do 2 smash beers with each of those, and then do some blending and see how those 2 hops work together. Because sometimes not all hops work well together with others. It can really, I've had experience before where, it definitely changes how the hops are and characteristics with each other. And sometimes you come out with some pretty poor results if you're not matching the hops together properly. And sometimes you can really come out with a winner. So smash beer blending, that's hard to say. Smash beer blending is definitely a way that you can try out new hops and see how they interact with other hops that you enjoy. Another experiment that you might try with a smash beer is doing a smash beer with one hop and then you dry hop with another one. Or you look at a dry hop schedule. You know, if I leave the hops in the smash beer for 5 days, what does it impart? If I leave it in for 2 days, how is that? You know, different dry hop temperatures. You can do a bunch of different things even with dry hopping and see how those conditions affect the final beer. So there's a whole, you know, myriad of options when you're doing a smash beer, and you know, there's no right or wrong way necessarily to do it, but get out there and experiment and try some of those techniques and see what kind of results you get from it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised for sure. This has been Brian for Short Circuited Brewers. We'll see you on the next video.